Chapter 38. A Mage's Journey Begins. The tomb was beautiful. A single pale stone obelisk, which had a stylized sun on top, rose up 100 feet into the air. Around its base was a fountain where water gurgled and bubbled pleasantly. Flowers, white, all white, with deep green stems, floated on the water's surface. Others filled in between the winding paths that led to a single white stone building with columns on the front and a set of golden doors studded with gemstones. Vex padded up the 3 broad white steps to the doors. There were large golden braziers lit with golden flames on either side of the doors, ever burning, ever bright. Vex placed his right hand against the center of the doors, palm flat against the metal, fingers splayed out. He lowered his head and simply stood there as if listening. Or praying, Finley thought. Finley remained by the obelisk and fountain. It seemed wrong to approach this tomb any closer without an invitation. He didn't want to disrupt Vex either in his mourning. Whose tomb is this? Finley wondered, but he thought he knew. There was a name carved into the stones above the entranceway, or he thought it was a name anyways. But it obviously wasn't in English or Katir. It likely was in the Kindrith tongue, which Finley could not read. But he believed it likely spelled out Sun King Alduin Fairlin. In a way, there were a million objections to this being the famed Sun King's tomb. After all, would not the Sun Elves have objected to their greatest leader being buried in the Underdark, in King Vex's Illithor? The histories all agreed that before Alduin's death, he and Vex had been estranged at best, or, as many stated, enemies. Yet Alduin is buried here. I feel it. Finley sat on the edge of the fountain. He realized there were fish swimming there. They rose to the surface, mouthing the air, and then dropped below. Their orange and gold bodies darted among the dark green of the stems. They appeared to be koi, but they were likely some other species native to the Underdark. They were lovely and peaceful, and sustained by magic. All of this is. For how long have these spells lasted? Millennia? Countless millennia, likely? Has Vex been back here since he left? I don't think so. But it explains why he allows no one in Illithor. This is a city of the dead. Finley, what is my Raven's favorite thing to do? Vex asked. Startled, Finley lifted his eyes to the Night King. Vex was no longer standing with his head bowed and his hand pressed against doors he seemed unwilling or unable to open and enter. Instead, he was at the base of the steps, smiling at Finley with an open, almost eager expression. His favorite thing? Finley stammered. Well, if I'm honest, always. Vex chuckled. A good fight, Finley answered. Vex lifted a delicate eyebrow. He likes violence. No, not like that. When he fights, it's like a dance. He's beautiful to watch. Finley worried at his lower lip, trying to capture Declan in those moments and words. When the Leviathan came, and he had only a kitchen knife to defend me and Gemma against the hordes of them, I stopped being afraid at some point. Because I was so amazed by what he could do, the sheer grace of it. Flying through the air, gliding over the ground, moving like silk in the wind. He shifted a little on the cool stone, his fingers trailing into the water. The fish nibbled lightly at his fingertips. It tickled. He's completely and utterly at one with the moment, not in the past or future, but in the present. So, there. I see. His mother was like that, Vex answered. His mother? Finley perked up. Is she with you? But then he realized that Vex said was, not is. Was like that. Past tense, not present. No. Vex shook his head and gestured to the opposite side of the obelisk that Finley had ignored, thinking it was just more of the garden. But there was something laying there, something not so finely wrought. On a slab of stone that might have had another purpose was a long, low pile of rocks. It was the length and width of a body. Finley swallowed and shakily got up to his feet. He glanced over at Vex. The Night King gestured again towards the object. He meant for Finley to go over to it. Suddenly, Finley desperately didn't want to. But his desire to know came over him, and he was moving towards it. His breath held, his heart was hammering. What is this? The stones piled a foot high were dark, black, evidently hacked out of the earth elsewhere. They were not the clean white stone used for Alduin's tomb. Above the tip of the pile was scrawled, carved really with no precision and a rather shaky hand in anguished determination, a name, and below it another word. It was etched in the stone again and again. The lines were broken and ragged. Finley brushed his fingertips over them and snatched his hand back. They were sharp, uneven. They hurt. What does it say? Finley asked. Lady Ashrin Zinzadoral, Vex answered. Mother. Finley turned his head to look at the Night King. Zinzadoral? It was a name that Declan had told him to look up. It was part of Declan's full name. Is this Robin's mother? A simple nod, nothing more. But I don't understand, Finley protested. No Kindrith has lived here in millennia. Why would she be buried here? Because she died here, Vex answered simply. The Night King's expression was completely smooth and unreadable. Did he feel grief about this? Was he glad about it? Angry, rageful, gleeful? Had she betrayed him? Had he killed her? Or had he loved her as much as Alduin? All was hidden from Finley. But he didn't bury her in a beautiful tomb like Alduin. She's covered by rocks and Vex didn't bury her. Mother. A child did. Her son buried her. Finley took in a sharp breath and abruptly straightened. Did Declan, Robin, bury her here? Was he here for her death? Yes. Finley's heart was pounding. His breathing quickened once more. Nausea bubbled in his belly. There for two mothers' deaths. Oh, God, Declan, he whispered, anguished beyond words for his best friend. Is that why you took his memories, King Vex? I did not take his memories. Vex's expression was completely blank like glass, yet Finley could see nothing behind it. So who did, and why? What was he doing here? He wasn't with you here, was he? Even as Finley asked the last question, he knew that Vex had not come here in some time. Vex's red eyes looked steadily into his. All good questions, Finley. Complicated answers. Or not complicated, Finley answered, surprised at his own sharpness. You don't want to tell me. I do not owe you those answers, do I? Vex lifted an eyebrow. Realizing that Vex was right, Declan was owed these answers, not him. No, but Robin. Declan may not ask. Why do you say that? Vex's voice was toneless. Maybe he hoped that Declan wouldn't ask. Maybe he wanted to shield his son from this. Maybe he shouldn't ask, because the answers will be painful. Finley shook his head. Maybe he should just forget all of this forever. For some reason, he kept thinking of the layers of blood tattoos on Vex's skin. Remembering this might cause a few more to be added to Declan's body. Did he want that? No, because each mark represented some pain, some hurt, some horrible necessity. But the truth is the truth. Shying away from it isn't wise, his conscience told him. But his love for Declan meant he wanted to shield his best friend from whatever had caused him to scratch mother into this stone again and again and again. The answers to these questions are not why you are here, Finley, Vex reminded him. Finley's head jerked back up to look at the Night King. I don't know what you mean. I'm not here for anything. I was only brought along to lead the others to the Pedway, and you're here because you want to fight by my son's side, Vex interrupted. And you cannot do that as you are now, without certain knowledge and perhaps materials. Finley's heart raced again, but this time with sick anticipation. The desire for magic was like a drug, its aphrodisiac qualities overriding his system easily. And he couldn't help Declan's mother. She was dead and gone but he could help her son. He could be by Declan's side no matter what danger they faced. It would be faced together. You brought me here, Finley corrected, because I'm your son's best friend, and he wouldn't have wanted me to die. Vex flashed a white, sharp grin. I could have saved you back on Earth. No, I brought you here because don't you believe you have a story, Finley? A greater purpose, a fate. I I don't know. But Finley's heart cried out otherwise. He found himself quickly adding, I've always wanted to believe so. But that has seemed to be for others, not me. Like Declan, who is so special. But I'm not. Just strange and don't really fit in. But what if it's not? What if your story really takes off here? Vex pointed, but not at the ground of the tomb, but towards a deeper spot in Illithor. Finley found himself moving so that he could see clearly where Vex was pointing. He followed Vex's pointed finger. It was aimed towards a low, bulbous tower that squatted rather than soared at the end of a twisting set of stairs and pathways. The tower was a dark crimson color, like old blood. At first, the base of it was completely dark, but then a brazier flared to life by an open doorway, red flames. Finley's heart thudded heavily in his chest. He swallowed, suddenly bitter bile in his mouth. What's that? What's there? Finley asked. That is the temple of the Necrolim, Vex said, where death is worshipped. Is, not was? So death is still worshipped there? Death? Finley thought of what Vex had said about how a human would get their power through death, not life. Could this be a place where he could learn about that? He couldn't quite imagine how gaining magic from death would work. Draining life, maybe. But that sounded wrong. That was still life. Reaching beyond life? How would he ever do anything like that? Maybe there are answers inside. Vex wouldn't point it out otherwise. To become a mage, Finley, one must strive and suffer. One must reach. One must face great dangers inside and out. And one must do it alone. The last word sounded like the tolling of a sonorous bell. Finley's head jerked again towards the Night King. You want me to go there? By myself? I want. Vex's eyebrows raised. I thought we were talking about what you want. If the way to discover magic I can wield is there, I will go. Finley stood up straighter, but he realized he was trembling slightly. It was one thing to walk through Illithor's silent streets by Vex's side, but to go alone towards an evil-looking temple and head inside to face who knew what? By himself? Without magic or weapons or anything? It sounds suicidal. But he wouldn't even tell me about that place if he thought I couldn't succeed and come back with knowledge. Declan would kill him, for one. And I don't think he wants me to die. You could go there if you wish. Or you could stay here till Ravin and the others arrive to rescue you. Vex shrugged as if it was no never mind to him. Finley's shoulders curled forward at that description. He imagined Declan and the others appearing at the top of the path to the tomb. His best friend would have a look of determination on his face. He would race to Finley. He would check him for wounds. When he would see that there were none, or just a few scrapes and bruises, he wouldn't chastise Finley for being foolish and coming closer to watch the fight. No. He would say nothing other than he was glad Finley was okay. But inside, Declan would be thinking, I will never let Finley accompany me on another dangerous mission. I need to keep him safe. And then he thought of Raeliff's reaction too. The elf would be worried about him, horrified by what happened with the Leviathan. So he too would never allow Finley to accompany him anywhere outside of Tyrael. After all, even as heavily spelled as Finley had been, that had not been enough to protect him. He'd cowered like a rabbit. Raeliff might not even show Finley any more magic for fear it would encourage him to take more risks. Magics he believes I cannot wield, can never wield. But Vex thinks otherwise. And that was when Finley knew that he would rather face any danger then remain here until the others came to rescue him. Besides, if there was magic in that temple, think of what he could do with it. Bringing magic to humanity was a worthy goal. It was a hero's journey, or a mage's journey, and I will take it. Will you still be here when I return? Finley asked. We will see each other again, Vex answered with a smile. Finley nodded. He hesitated a moment, but then bowed to Vex. Thank you for saving me and for showing me the way, King Vex. It has been an honor and a pleasure to meet you. Vex chuckled softly. I would hold off on the thanks for the second part until later. There was a cost to magic, Finley knew. Maybe for a human to wield it, the cost would be quite high. Vex was warning him of that, and yet that did not dissuade him in even the slightest. There could be no gain without cost, and the price of magic, no matter how high to himself, would be worth it. For a moment, his mother's face flashed before his mind's eye, that look of disdain, or was it something else, after one of his failed experiments. But he pushed the memory of her aside, rose from the bough, and immediately started down the path that would lead him to the temple of the Necrolum. He forced himself not to look back to see if Vex still lingered by the dual grave sites. He wanted to think of the Night King watching over him as he strode confidently ahead, making sure that nothing would sneak up on him. But that was a weakness. Alone. A mage goes alone. Finley set his shoulders and hustled up the broad black steps, going up and up and up the switchbacks as they led towards the temple of the Necrolum. His eyes darted to the right and left. He stopped every so often and listened intently. The Leviathan made a hissing sound as they slithered towards their prey. It was a dry, papery rustle, but he heard nothing except his own labored breathing. He'd gone up nearly 6 sets of stairs. The Temple of the Necrolum was seemingly cradled by other, far larger, taller buildings, and all but the front of it. But it reminded him of a black spot, a cancer, in comparison to the tall towers that surrounded it, a strange growth. When he reached the top of the last set of steps before the temple, there was black gravel, smoothly raked, going up to the entrance. There were simple glass stones that formed a path. He stared at them and the gravel. Is this a trap? If I walk on the stones, will I be safe? Or if I take the indicated path, will I show I cannot think for myself? After all, how does one approach death? With great care. Finley crouched down on his haunches and lightly brushed the gravel. It reminded him of pumice, volcanic rock on Earth. Half an inch down, there was a black, oily substance. He jerked his hand back. Walking on the gravel is a no-go. There's something underneath it. He stared at the simple 6-inch glass stones that were placed for easy stepping. These were a solution to not touch this oily substance. Or were they? He reached into his pocket and found a coin pressed with Aquilon's image. He stood up and flipped the coin onto the first glass step. It landed with a jangling sound. At first, nothing happened, but Finley continued to wait. The glass stone suddenly depressed and the oily substance covered it completely. There was a sucking, gulping sound as the glass stone was completely consumed. And while it took a moment for the trap to trigger, I bet with my weight upon it, that would happen immediately. And who knows what that material will do if it touches skin? He wondered if worshippers here used magic to levitate into the temple. Perhaps some did, but there must be another way that he could use, as Vex had sent him here, knowing he had no magical ability that he could access yet in any case. He looked about him and saw that the left side of the gravel, there was a thin lip of raised stone all around the edge that if one were excruciatingly careful, one could inch along to get to the entrance. That is the way in. Finley went over to the ledge and slid 1 foot out onto it. He flattened his back against the wall of the building beside the temple and slowly began to slide his way towards the entrance of the temple. He was breathing rapidly through his nose. He sounded rather like a winded horse, but he feared even opening his mouth and drawing in too much air that might push him further from the wall at his back and face first into the gravel. That oily material on his skin would be horrific. Not many people could get in here quickly or easily. I doubt they had Sunday services for a crowd. Sweat broke out across his forehead and upper lip. It soaked a line along his spine. His hands were slick with it, and he guessed he left smears against the wall of the building he inched along. Finally, he was making a nearly 90-degree turn so that his back would be to the temple wall. It was round and bulged outwards. It would be harder to cling to. He put his foot sideways on the ledge and stepped over so that his back would be against the temple. It was then that he looked up, back towards Alduin's tomb. Vex was not there. His heart lurched in his chest. He's left me. It was a childish thing to think, and it caused him to lean forward, almost as if to reach for where Vex had been. He started to fall forwards. Finley slammed himself against the temple wall, scrambling at the stone to gain some kind of purchase. His fingers slipped against the slick stone. Terror bloomed in his guts. Move, move, move! He shifted his body, somehow keeping on the stone ledge as he scrambled towards the open entrance to the temple of the Necrolim. 5 feet away, 4 feet, 3, 2, 1. He lunged, throwing himself through the doorway where he sprawled on the cold ground of the temple's foyer. He laid there for long moments, breathing hard and his heart hammering in his ears. He'd made it. That's only the first test. There are likely to be far more inside, he reminded himself. Finally, after long moments, he lifted himself up on shaking arms and slid his trembling legs underneath him. He got to his feet. His knees nearly buckled, but he firmed them. He dusted off his pants. First, he looked into the interior of the temple. This antechamber was circular. The floor was tiled in a mosaic in black and white. The skulls of humans and elves looked similar, or he supposed they did, so it didn't shock him by seeing what looked like a human skull detailed in tiles before him. Or maybe it looks that way for me. After all, what elves would worship death? But other beings were a part of the empire that might have done so. Yet it was a human skull that was there. It knows I'm here. Finley shuddered, but there was the burn of excitement in his belly. If the temple knew he was here and put a human skull there, this was meant. This was the beginning of his journey. Without a backwards glance, he headed deeper into the temple. Members agree that The Night Prince is one of the best stories I've ever written. As it should be, since it comes after 15 years of experience as a fantasy and urban fantasy writer. But what about all the other stories I've written that came before The Night Prince? The two most popular, Dragon's Reign and Everdark, are now book and audiobook series, just like The Night Prince. The others are available to read on my serial website, wraithrain.com. They're all romantic stories and all set in alternative worlds with magic and monsters. I've written since 2010, so there is a lot to explore, from Yakuza with supernatural powers to other high fantasy with many of the same ideas you can find in The Night Prince. Money from the membership is how I'm able to hire a team to produce this podcast. If you want to support it and you want to take a peek at my older stories, subscribe for a while. I have 1 month, 3 month, 6 month, and year subscriptions. The link is in the notes. Thanks so much for supporting us.